Boilies, just an ounce shy of the magical 20-pound barrier, and this starts my masterclass on boilie fishing. So whether you're fishing a busy day ticket lake like Sandhurst in the UK or any of the waters in Europe and you're fishing with boilies, exactly the same rules apply. So we're going to get this fella back and start with all that tackle. I've chosen to use a mid-range set of kit on this particular session. The lake's about 20-25 acres, probably typical of most carp lakes that most people will fish, so you don't need the top end gear to fish them. I'm using a 12-foot 3 3/4 longbow. That is a completely different animal from the rest of the longbow range. It's a rod that came from a day I went out with one of the Japanese rod makers, showed him what carp anglers do, showed him long range fishing, and he designed that rod to suit. It's got a really good recovery for the price range, looks beautiful, 50mm butt rings going all the way down to a 16mm tip. The same matte finish as you see in all the longbow range, but it is much more of a casting tool. And my recommendation is to use the stiffest rods you possibly can. So if at the moment you're using 2 3/4 or 3-pounders, if you're going to step up to a 3 3/4 because you'll get much more distance. Now here I'm fishing at about 80 yards range, but I'm fishing with pinpoint accuracy. I've got all 3 rods very close together, and that's what a stiffer rod gives you, that accuracy at distance. I can probably punch a bag with these about 100-110 yards with accuracy, and if I went down to tapered subline with these in a 4-ounce lead, I can probably put a single bait 140 yards. So they're very versatile and very affordable as well. And I've coupled that with a Crosscast X reel. Looks like a top of the range reel, but it's actually the lowest price big pit reel that Daiwa sell. Still got a quick drag on the front, so when I'm getting a take, I'm closing that down really quickly and pulling up into the fish, and it's still got a really kind line clip. That's really important. You'll see when I'm casting out, I'm fishing against the clip all the time. That's a massive part of my fishing. It's very kind to the line, so it'll hit the clip, drop in position, take it out the clip, and it won't kink the line. And that's what you'll see with other big pit reels that are in that same price range. Put the line under the clip, pull it back out, and it's flattened it off, and sometimes that can snap. So that's really important. A good retrieve on there as well. Most importantly for us carp anglers, we're all tackle tarts. They look really nice as well. They look a lot more expensive than they actually are. Now they're coupled with 15-pound subline. This is the brown version, sinks really well, but in this situation the thing I'm looking for is diameter. It's 0.40 diameter, which is quite thick, but because it's so supple, it casts really well. It's very, very weedy out there. When I'm playing fish, I'm really having to play them hard. This is very robust stuff. I use it if I'm fishing in France for 50, 60, 70 pounders. I'll use it in the UK at Wellington Country Park for 40 pounders in heavy weed, and it stands up to the test. It is very, very tough line, but it casts extremely well. And then the bobbins, you'll see the stove bobbins, I use them absolutely everywhere. I couldn't go back to a normal bobbin now because they're semi-fixed on the line. Every little tiny bit of movement moves the bobbin straight away. Normal bobbins, they just slide through a little bit so you don't get the bite indication quite as quickly. And on this setting, I've got them sort of hanging down sort of halfway underneath the rod, so the line's sort of semi-tight. Because it's weedy, I want to see a bite straight away. Normally I'd fish them very slack and let the line sink down, but here you can't afford to do that. So I've added the extra weight onto the bottom of them just to keep a little bit more tension in the line, and they're sort of hanging down about so far. And as soon, literally, if I get a bream or a carp, the bite indication is instant and it's pulling straight up to the top. I've got the clutch really tight on there. I'm winding down, I'm into the fish really quickly. That's really important in weed. You don't want the clutch really loose, you don't want the fish charging off and taking loads of line. You want to be on the rod straight away, into the fish and trying to walk back in the swim and then wind yourself forward again. If you let the fish charge through 3 or 4 weed beds, you're probably not going to get it in. You can feel that horrible grating feeling and then it all goes solid. And my recommendation, if that does happen, put the rod back down on the rest, loosen the clutch off and let the fish free itself from the weed rather than pulling and pulling and pulling. I've done it before myself and you end up snapping up. Let the fish pull itself away, and then once it's moving you can get it out the weed and hopefully get it in. Check that fella out. I know it's only a bucket, but a very good bucket it is. I think they're about 12 or 13 litres, so you get loads of bait in there. They're nice and square, so they fit on top of your trolley really well. And then they've got a little sort of tray that goes in the top there. That's my ground bait that's going to plug the back of the spod. And then obviously you've got the big cavity in there with the bait in. Use these all the time now. 4 go on the top of my carp porter. Absolutely brilliant product. And then to show you the mix, as I've said, we're boilie fishing. but we've got a few tigers in there as well, and I think it always helps to add a few extra food items in there. We've seen this on the underwater filming. If the fish are not really interested in feeding just on boilies, you put something else in the swim and they start feeding on both things. In this case, I've used tiger nuts. The mistake I made at the start of the session, I put loads of sweet corn in this mix. I've done really well on that before. On here it was a kiss of death because there's loads of bream in here. The bream came in, and I think I had 5 or 6 bream to start off with. So I've dropped the corn out of the mix and just boilies and tigers. So if you're fishing somewhere that's got lots of bream in, I know a load of the Dutch lakes that I've fished and the Belgian lakes have had lots of bream in, don't put anything like corn or hemp or pellet or anything. Just stick to boilies and a few nuts in there, and that'll bring the carp in and hopefully not draw the bream in so much. So you see there the mix we've got some half baits, some full baits as well. I love using half baits, chop them up with a cutter. If I'm fishing close in, I'll catapult them in, they make almost no splash, and obviously if I'm spodding, they fit into the spod really well. And on those boilies I've poured some hemp oil, that's soaked into the boilies. The fish absolutely love the taste of that, and the added bonus is when they start feeding on your bait out there, you get a slick come up and you know it's going to happen. The reel is designed specifically for spodding. It's the Daiwa Emblem spod. I've used this one for years. I absolutely love this. Great big spool so the blade fries off it. A really fast crank on it, 75 turns, brings it back 100 yards, where a normal fishing reel is 100, 110 turns for 100 yards. And that really makes a big difference when you're doing a lot of long range spodding. And then a very kind line clip, that's really important. If that clip was fraying the braid or cutting into the mono when you were spodding, you'd end up with loads of problems. That's really kind to it, that absolutely never happens. And the braid itself is designed specifically for spodding. You can see it's a bright green colour, that's on purpose. It's going to float on the surface, and if I wanted to bait up with a throwing stick, what I'd do is spod out some boilies, leave the spot on the surface so it marks the distance, and then start putting the baits out with a throwing stick. And because you've got that bright coloured braid, the gulls will dive down and try and get the baits, but they won't actually go into the water because they're scared of the braid. And that's attached to 30-pound armour cord, which is really hard wearing braid. You can cast and cast and cast with that. I've joined it together with a 4-turn water knot, which is a tiny little knot. You never hear it go through the rings, and it just makes the whole job so much easier. And then the rod, that's a Longbow DF spod rod, a really stiff rod, very fast recovery, but quite light considering how powerful it is. A long handle and 50mm butt rings going down to 16mm tip, so the line absolutely flies off of there. That's really important when you're spodding. If you're going a long way, you need the right kit to do it. And then the spod I'm using in this situation, that's a Sky Winder, so you can see it's solid all the way up to the veins. And I'm going to put the boilies and tigers in there, fill it up with a bit of water, and that's going to stop the bait coming out the back. And as I put a few spods out, we're going to look at the technique and also the other spods that you can use. So first of all, I've got it all in front of me, all ready to go. Just a scoop up into there, sort of 2/3 fill it, and then just dunk it in the water a couple of times. That's going to hold the baits in. Pick up the line with the bail arm directly underneath the rod. The drop on the rod is about half the length of the rod, and you can see there'll be a transfer of weight. So I'll go from my back foot through onto my front foot. It's only 80 yards, and with this kit it's really easy, but watch the technique anyway because it will help you get further. Start off from my back foot, through onto my front foot. Dink, hit the clip. Actually cast that one too hard, it hit the clip about 20 foot off the water. And then just give it a couple of seconds for the spod to clear. That's what you see a lot of people do wrong. As soon as it's hit the surface, they're winding it back in again. It doesn't give the bait a chance to come out the back of it. So probably the count of 10, all the baits will be dropping out the bottom of it. Flick the floating braid up off the surface and just try and get the back of the spod out of the water as quickly as you can. In this situation, back up to my hand, pour the water out. About 15-20 baits in there. Dunk it into the water, and the thing to concentrate on here is the splash that this fella makes when it hits the surface, or the lack of it. So weight transfer, just a nice gentle splash on the surface, and after a fish I'll probably put 6 or 8 of these out again and just try and draw the fish back into the water. If I want to put a bit more bait out and not create any splash, then I'll swap over to this fella. That's the original Skyliner, and I'll sort of 3/4 fill it and then plug it with a bit of ground bait at the top. That stops anything coming out the back, hits the water, clears really quickly. and then bring it back in. But in this situation, 6 or 8 spods in the smaller size is enough to get another bite, creates minimum disturbance, and that's how you get a big hit. Wriggling just in your forearms like that over the top of the mat, let him get it out of his system. You can normally see their tail starts tensing up. It might be okay now. No, I can feel him. You can normally feel him, see his tail starting to go. What a lot of people do at this point is let go of them. But you can either put him down on the mat or just hold him in your forearms like that. And then we hold him up. And there he is. 25.5 pounds it went. Well chuffed to get this one off the spot. And it just shows that the baiting situation is working. So we're going to get him back and show you the rig we caught him on. This is my #1 rig for fishing with boilies. It's the IQD rig. You've probably seen me use it before. I've caught some massive fish on this all over Europe on a variety of different waters. It incorporates, in this case, a size 4 curve shank hook, quite a big hook, but because the bait hovers above it when it's lying on the bottom and the bait's got buoyancy to it, it negates the weight of the hook, so you can get away with a bigger hook, which I think is better for snagging in the fish's mouth. These size 4 captor curves are extremely sharp, and basically I've tied some 20 pound IQ2 using my favourite whipping knot onto the top of the shank of the hook. Basically you make a big loop underneath the hook, keeping the tag end really short, and with the front of the loop you just wrap around the hook once and then wrap around again to cross over, and then carry on wrapping down the hook towards your fingertips. When you've done 4 or 5 turns, pull the knot tight with the tag end and then move it up the hook before you pull it fully tight, otherwise you won't be able to move it. You can see there I've got it just above the barb of the hook, so I've got a nice big D. So once it's in position, pull it really tight and cut off the tag end, and then a micro rig swivel gets slid onto that before I tie the knotless knot. So I'm going back through the eye of the hook towards the point, wrapping around the hook 4 or 5 times really tightly. You've got to make sure that everything's lined up nicely on the back of the hook there so it sits perfectly on the bottom. Then the line goes back through the eye of the hook to pull it tight, just a simple knotless knot, and that's basically the D done. And what I like about it is that the bait and the hook are very close together, yet there's still a nice amount of movement in the bait. So if I put this in the palm of my hand and show you how it's going to catch hold, that's just turning straight away because of the stiffness of the hook link and the pattern of the hook. As soon as I tighten that up, it's turning over and catching hold. And even though the bait's close to the hook, you can see there the bait's moving around, so it's not getting in the way. And then moving down the hook link, sort of just short of halfway, I've got a small size sinker, and then around that I've put some of the dark matter putty. And what that does is it throws it out as it hits the bottom, so the rig sits flat on the bottom every single time. If you put the putty too close to the eye of the hook, that bit will sink first and the top of the hook link will be looped up, and that can get in the way. Sometimes the fish can spook off of it. And then down to the other end, I've got a link loop tied on there. It's just tied on with a 4-turn half blood knot, very, very simple knot to tie. Through the link loop, round the hook link 4 times, back through the loop you've created, and pull the tag end tight first before you pull the knot properly tight, and that will give it a little bit of extra room, and it will stop kinking the hook link on the end there. You can see that it's nice and straight, so it hasn't lost any breaking strain. And that whole thing is attached to my favourite lead system. This is the cog lead, centre of gravity that means, so you're basically picking the lead up from the heaviest point first. And that definitely gets me more bites. I've used this for a few years now, and I'm absolutely convinced I'm catching more fish because the fish are feeling the full weight of the lead instantly. Now we've mucked around with this system quite a bit, and we've now come up with this swivel system that's got a peg moulded around it. You can see this is a prototype because the swivel's still got a silver colour to it. That's why I've covered it up with shrink tube. But getting that peg to fit in the lead perfectly is what we've been playing around with, and that pushes in under just enough tension. So if we get a take, if I just shake this, boom, it's come off. So first of all it pulls out of there, and then the lead has actually come off the hybrid lead clip. You see there I've got a swivel moulded all the way through the lead clip, so there's no way it can pull out the front, and this will actually come all completely tied for you. Just slide the lead on. This is a 3.5 flat pair in this situation. Let's put that back on again. So we're just sliding that onto the arm like so. The rubber goes over the top, just wet the back of that so there's not too much tension on it, and then push the peg into it. That's not going to pull out on the cast even with a small PVA bag, but once you get a take, that's going to pull out and turn it into a normal lead clip system. So it's very, very versatile. And that's finished off with some dark matter rig tubing. Absolutely love this stuff. Very, very easy to thread, very heavy as well, and picks up the contours of the bottom, and that will stop the whole thing tangling on the cast because it's thicker and heavier behind the lead. It just stops the hook link from wrapping around it, and when you're playing the fish, that's the thing that's rubbing against the fish as well, rather than the line rubbing against them. So it's kinder to the fish as well. And just before I cast it out, I'll fold a little bit of dissolving foam around the hook to stop that hook from tangling. And if you watch it when you cast, you can see the hook bait is well away from the lead system. It's definitely not tangled, sits on the bottom bolt upright, and then when that foam melts away, it will just fall over because of that bit of putty, and the rig is fishing. So if you're boilie fishing in any country around the world, that is what I recommend. The buoyancy of the hook bait is absolutely key to the success of the IQD rig, and I've achieved that buoyancy in a few different ways here. So the first one is probably my favourite. It takes a little bit more time to do, but I think it's worth it. Basically, you get some boilie paste and just knead cork dust into it. You can buy the cork dust in your local tackle shop. Just knead it in, roll one into a ball, drop it in a glass of water. It'll probably sink to start off with. Take it out, back into the paste, more cork dust on it, roll it into a ball again, drop it in, and you want it so it just floats up to the surface. You can then roll your whole mix, boil them for a couple of minutes, and they're all the perfect buoyancy. And you basically want it sitting just like that really, so the hook is laying flat on the bottom and the bait is just hovering above. And that basically means the bait is obscuring the fish's view of the hook, which I think helps it get taken in the first place. And then if the rig is ejected, then it will come back and sit in that same position again because of the buoyancy of that bait. The hook is obviously heavy, the bait is lighter, and it will always sit over that way. And then the second one's really simple to do. It's just a standard 20mm bottom bait. I've drilled it out with a nut drill. This is the 8mm size, and then filled it up with a cork plug, and that's gone almost all the way through the bait to give it enough buoyancy so it sits in that same way. You don't want too much buoyancy in these baits, so the hook sits over like that. You want the hook laying flat on the bottom. I think that's a little bit too obvious. It's almost getting towards a pop-up. And then moving on to the next one, we've got my take on a classic snowman setup. So normally you'd have one boilie on top, which would be a pop-up, and another boilie underneath. But everybody uses snowmen, and I've found by halving them, you've just got one bait there. You've still got the buoyancy and the attraction of the snowman, but it's not quite so obvious. So on the top there, that's actually a Milky Toffee pop-up, one of the small 10mm ones, and that's been soaked in the almond goo, and it's soaked all the way through to the middle of that. Then half a 15mm hybrid bottom bait underneath it, and that gives it that same buoyancy, so the hook lays flat on the bottom and the bait just hovers above. The only downside I'd say to that one, because you're half and half in the baits, you're allowing water to get into the centre, so it doesn't retain its buoyancy for quite as long. You can see with this one, I've scaled everything down, so it's a size 6 curve shank with a smaller bait. So if I'm fishing for smaller fish and it's not so weedy, that's probably what I'd go for. And then the last one, a bit of plastic corn with a smaller bait underneath it. That sits in the same way. That's the Banoffee pop-up corn, which has got great buoyancy to it. That'll hold that bait up really well. And you can see this one, I've changed the pattern of hook as well. This is a wide gate rather than a curve shank. If you find you're pulling out a fish on curve shanks, maybe it's very weedy and you have to pull really hard, or the fish got particularly soft or damaged mouths, then I go over to a wide gate and you'll find all of that stops. So that's how to create the different buoyancies. Actually putting them on the hair, basically what I do is get a bit of floss, put it through the eye of the micro rig swivel, needle through the bait, and pull all bits of floss through the bait, and then pull the tag end out, tie that in an overhand knot around the hair stop, and the first couple of overhand knots you do, don't pull them too tight, because otherwise you'll drag that boilie more onto that micro rig swivel and you'll close everything up and it won't move up and down the D. Once you've done those 2 knots to start off with, the last one you tie, go through the loop twice and pull it down really tight. You won't pull it any further onto the swivel then. Trim it off and then just burn it with a lighter to neaten it up, and that keeps it on. And that means you can use baits of any different size on that same rig. You haven't got to tie loads of different lengths of hairs. It's very, very versatile, and with that added buoyancy, you know the rig's going to reset every time until you actually hook one. Well, we are into another carp in very, very weedy conditions on that IQD rig and cog system. It's kiting round to the right now. I'm really having to give these fish some stick, and this is where a heavier test curve rod really pays. You see this 3 3/4 still really bends well, and I'm very thankful for having 15-pound subline on at this point. I'm trying to keep the fish up in the surface layers. Oh, he's just charging off now. These are hairy battles. Fish is staying in the upper layers, which suggests the lead has come off. You've just got to keep the pressure on them. Now, it's just charging around on the surface. It's really test the tackle to the limit, this does. Come on, fella. Come on, you are mine. Get in the net. Yes, got him. Wicked, that is brilliant. What a way to finish. And how about that to finish my boilie fishing masterclass? 26 pounds, 2 ounces of stunning Sandhurst common carp. Well chuffed to get this one. And if you employ the tactics I've shown you, I'm sure you'll be catching loads of these as well.